All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining today's webinar on navigating the 2025 Public Pension Compensation Survey. My name is Hank Kim, and I'm NCPERS Executive Director, and I will serve as moderator for today's webinar. Today's program is part of our Center for Online Learning, which provides remote continuing education to public pension trustees, staff, and other fiduciaries and stakeholders. In today's webinar, we will learn more about the annual compensation survey. You'll receive step-by-step guidance on completing the survey and have the opportunity to get your questions answered by CBIZ compensation experts. Leading us in today's discussion are Joe Rice and Taylor Sprague. Joe is a director in the Compensation Consulting Division of CBIZ Talent and Compensation Solutions, where he leads the broad-based compensation practice. He brings total rewards and human resource experience to the practice. Prior to joining the firm, Joe led the compensation function for large multinational organizations. Taylor is a consultant with CBIZ Talent and Compensation Solutions in the Denver office. Since joining CBIZ, Taylor's experience includes the use of compensation surveys to conduct market analysis for a wide variety of positions, industries, and organizations in regards to the designation of compensation, or excuse me, in regards to the design of compensation plans. We do encourage audience participation, so please use the platform's Q&A function to ask your questions. But please note, we will be holding your questions till the end of the presentation. With that, Joe, Taylor, the session is yours.
Thank you for that, Hank. I will share my screen to kick off with a few different slides. This round just a little. So good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here on launch day of our next compensation survey. So Hank just introduced both of us. So Taylor and I have been involved with the pension survey process that we did with NCBIZ going back to 2018, and we're excited about the partnership that we've had with NCPERS for the past now second year. Real quickly, if you're not familiar with CBIZ, we have a lot of different services within the public pension space. So obviously within compensation consulting, we do a lot of work there. I'll mention executive search. So some of you might know EFL Associates, that's a part of CBIZ. It's our executive search team. But then we also have a lot of plan administration solutions, actuarial and retirement services, as well as some investment advisory services. So very involved in the public pension space overall. More to the point of today, though, just want to talk through what we want to focus on today. As I mentioned, is launch day. The email went out to start the survey participation process. That went out at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So hopefully anyone on this call would have received that email. If not, it'd be worth reaching out to just make sure that you get that those details. We'll spend most of our time today looking at just at how to complete the survey. So it is a consistent survey year over year, but we know that there might be the responsibility might have passed on to somebody new, or there might be a fund who has not participated in the past and is interested. So we just want to walk through what that survey submission process entails, and then want to have some time as well to just answer any questions that you have. With that, I will switch over to the Excel file, what we call the data collection file. Taylor, just give me a nod. Is that Excel file showing for you? Yeah, okay. So we call this the data collection file, or you will see DCF. So this is our primary survey instrument to collect data. When you open up the Excel file, you'll see it's got a different tabs or worksheets that outline the different content and input that we're looking for. The first worksheet is just instructions. So I won't go through this in detail because we're essentially going to go through that worksheet by worksheet, but this is the overall introduction to the data collection file. So there's some terminology, just some process things that we're looking for here. One of the first worksheets that we want to collect information on is just contact information. So you'll see that we're looking for your organization name and address information. It can be really important in the organization name if you can complete that as accurately as possible without any of the kind of shortened variations just to make sure that we capture that correctly. And then we have two different contact fields. So we're asking first, who should we contact if we have any questions about the survey submission? So that's probably going to be you if you're on this call, but anyone who is taking the steps to compile this data, that's probably who we would want to follow up with if we do have any questions post submission. And then we capture a secondary contact that if there's someone else who should receive the results when they're compiled and ready, right? So if it's someone on the HR team that's completing the survey, but the results should go to the executive director, just put that alternative title there and we will send that to that contact as well. As we move on through the worksheet, we have different DCF worksheets. So starting with DCF1, this is where we're trying to capture some organization information. One of the slight changes we've had here is just we've added this column of X's and check marks just to indicate whether that field was sufficiently completed. So initially we're looking for budgeted full-time equivalent employees. That just helps us capture some demographic data where we can do some grouping of the analysis based on employee size. So if we just put 50 in and then it asks for investment staff versus non-investment staff, you'll see as you complete those, it'll start to get those check boxes. We are looking for numbers here. So if you were to type in the word 9, you'll see that it will keep with the red X. We're just trying to add some data confirmations around the process. The next section asks for the total number of members. So we're looking for active and retirees. So again, it's going to be a numerical number. How many retirement plans does your system administer? So really what we're trying to capture here is those kind of statutory entities. So you might have a municipal fund that has a lot of different plans that they administer. If it's just, you know, a police and fire plan for a municipality, that's just going to be one plan that's being administered. So it's going to help us from some reporting as well. As we look at assets under management, this is one too where we can hit some data issues. So if you can put that in as accurately as possible, you don't have to get it down to the dollar, but you know, we'd rather have all of the zeros in there than 50B or 50 billion or something like that. So we are asking for a numerical answer here. And then what type of employees, beneficiaries does your system serve? This is just something where we have a check mark or a drop down for a yes or no. So as you go through that process and, you know, if you hit a point where you don't provide any of that data, it would be helpful just to put the no, then to leave that blank just to get a positive confirmation. The organization, governance, and administration, like really what we're trying to understand in this section is the level of discretion to do things internally, you know, within the fund versus through the plan sponsor, right? So if you have the discretion to set your budget within the system, now we understand there might be board approval processes and things like that where it needs to be signed off, but if that responsibility is done internally and governance is going to have a, you know, kind of oversight of the process, we would want you to put the system. But as it comes down to, you know, staff wages, right? If employees are part of the state classification system or accounting classification system, and you don't have the discretion within the fund to set that, right? We're looking to understand some of those differences. And then we get into a couple of questions on investment fund allocation. So initially, we're trying to understand, does the system manage investment assets? That is a key distinction where we're trying to understand, you know, in some of those states where there might be a state investment body that handles all of the investments, right? So in a state like Minnesota, if you don't have, if those dollars aren't coming into you to manage, right, we want you to put no, separate system manages assets. If they are going to you to manage, we want that yes. And then we kind of build on that to understand how much of those are being managed, you know, internally through that manager of managers process, or you know, doing that direct investment. So all we're looking for here is the percentage allocation, right? So, 5%, kind of on down the line, just to capture what that split would look like.
Hey, Joe, could I ask a quick question before you move on?
Yeah.
So in that, does your system manage the investments? If you were to check no, then with the corresponding, sections below, would they require answers?
You could, there's not any logic that would block those from being answered, so they would still show up like that. We would be able to sort through that, but if you wanted to put 0% or something like that, we would be able to manage through that process. It's a good catch.
Great, thank you, Joe.
On DCF2, what we're looking here is compensation administration. So kind of still before we start collecting data by job, we want to understand the annual salary increase process. And so we ask for cost of living adjustments, merit, or other. And as we report that data back, we're going to look at the kind of overall reporting of it. So trying to understand how many take into account merit is basically what we're trying to get out of this process. Then we want to understand the salary increase budget as a percentage of employee salaries for the last completed review, right? So if you had a 4% budget last year for increases, that's all we're looking for. And then as you think forward to your next salary review process, similarly want to understand what's being budgeted for that process so we can help report out how those are, comparable to other public funds. A few questions about bonus and incentives. So we asked, does your system offer any bonus or short-term variable pay? If yes, is it tied to investment performance? And then if investment performance, is it based on absolute, relative, or both, right? Is your system experience problems with attracting and retaining skilled employees? So just kind of overall trying to understand from kind of broad labor markets, demographics, kind of how that is matching up. And then we get into the compensation philosophy. This is an entirely new section, and so we're hoping that this is going to be valuable information that we're going to be able to share. So first, we just want to understand, does your system utilize a compensation philosophy? So that is going to be something that really is going to provide the roadmap or the foundation for how you approach compensation. Typically, what's contained in a compensation philosophy is going to be some description of, how you define the labor market, who you compete with for talent. Is that strictly compared to other public funds? Do you look more broadly against other employers in your region? Those type of things. So if you do have a compensation philosophy, we're interested to understand what market percentile, or is it tied to a market percentile, first of all? That's a pretty common thing to say, if you want to build your pay structure around the middle of the market, that's typically going to be the market 50th percentile. Sometimes what we'll see is that, some might say we want to benchmark at the market 80th percentile or 30th percentile, different things like that. Again, if yes, is the philosophy based upon base salary or total cash compensation? So total cash compensation is a term that means, base salary plus any short-term variable pay through bonus or incentives. So that's going to help us understand, are you, where we see some incentive opportunity, are you trying to take that into consideration, or are you just leaving that off the table? And then if yes as well, what industry do you target beyond public pension funds? And so, if you don't have anything there, you can leave that blank. You might continue to see that red X, but, if you target financial services or endowments and foundations or, technology, it's really going to be an open box for that. And if yes, you target different industries for different segments of the workforce, right? So trying to get some nuance between that where, maybe for staff, you take a broader labor market approach. For, the executives, maybe that's pension specific or, however else defined. And then for the investments, could be private asset managers, endowments, foundations, different considerations like that. So a whole new section that we're hopeful we can have good insights to share back. Okay. Taylor, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. My screen sharing is saying, Joe, it needs you to stop sharing for me to be able to share.
Tell you what, why don't you just get off my screen?
Sounds good. All right, DCF3 is a pretty straightforward section here in the data collection file. So we're just wanting to understand what benefit offerings are provided by the system, right? And so again, we have that red X there in column D for when they're blank. And as you complete the dropdown of yes or no, they will change to the green or remain as a red. There's a catch-all at the top there for none does not sponsor. So at the top, we have, what types of health and other benefits does your system provide to staff? If you do leave items blank, we will assume that they are no. And so at the top there, just if you do not sponsor any of your benefits at the system, you can select that check right there in cell D6, and you can leave the rest blank. And so each of those items are just a simple drop down to yes or no. And then we have a catch-all there at the bottom in row 24 for what other benefits or perks you provide that are especially popular with staff. So just wanting to catch any items that may not be on this list that are popular or new at your system that you want to include here. DCF4 is where we collect all the system compensation data. And so I think that one of the biggest questions we get is it okay if I average salaries by position for our system's jobs, right? And so the answer to that would be no. So we recommend this DCF4 tab list every employee at the system. So we want to have that employee by employee data to be able to gather how many employees are making up certain jobs per system, right? So just going left to right here, we have column A as our employee ID, so not a social security number or any sensitive information, just an ID so we can designate per employee, per system, kind of a unique identifier, right? If it's hard to pull, you can simply just go 1, 2, 3 and number them down. Your job title, so what are you internally titling your position? So what one organization calls an accountant might be a general accountant somewhere else, but what are you terming each of these job titles at your system? Survey job code, so is a bit of a toggle between DCF4 and our job summaries tab. Joe, if you want to toggle over there quickly, this is where you would input column A, our survey job code. And so for each employee, which then will correlate to each position at your system, we're recommending you attempt to try and find a survey job code that matches to that job summaries tab. And so as we just saw, the job summaries is made up of a survey job code with a survey position job title and a survey job description. And so best practice would be a position that at least matches to the survey job description of 70% would be termed a survey benchmark match, right? And so if our positions do hit that 70% threshold of the job summary, we would ask that you then put that survey job code in column C. As Joe did, he put ADM102, which then why our column D is grayed out will pull through that survey job title benchmark. Column E is our full-time equivalency percentage per employee. So think of 100% would be a 40-hour-a-week employee, right? And so a 50% FTE on that same metric would be someone working 20 hours a week. So we're just trying to understand what is the full-time equivalency per employee per job, right? And so when we want to make sure that we're annualizing actual pay if needed for non 100% FTE employees when we compare and gather the data. Column F is the years the incumbent has served in the position. So how many years has the employee been in that job title that you listed? So not how many years since they've been hired, but how many years have they served in the position that they're listed on this data collection file. Annualized average base salary is column G. So we're looking for a whole number for an employee's salary that is annualized. So if we have an employee as a 50% FTE in column E, we're looking for that annualized salary as if they were 100% FTE equivalency. So if someone made $40,000 actual pay at that 50% FTE equivalency, that would be $80,000 annualized to bring that up the other 50% to 100%. Columns H, I, and J, we're looking for a salary range if applicable. So again, if you do not have a salary range for employees at your system, this can be left blank. But we're simply looking for the annualized minimum, midpoint, and maximum if a salary range is applicable at the system. Columns K, L, M, and N, we're looking for any of that bonus or short-term incentive compensation information, again, if applicable. If there's no bonus offerings at the system, you can leave these blank. But what we're asking for starting in column K, the threshold or minimum bonus percentage of base salary. Column L is the target bonus percentage of base salary. Column M is that maximum bonus percentage of base salary. And then N would be just what is the most recently awarded bonus paid to that employee as a whole dollar.
And Taylor, we have a couple questions coming in. I wasn't checking those earlier, but on here there was a question: if the person has been in the position less than a year, how would you like that reported? So what we would want to see is not year-to-date pay or anything like that. We would want to know that annualized salary. And then, for the bonus incentive, it does get a little tricky there, that if they were a position that was like eligible, but it's not showing up because they didn't receive that last year, it would probably just be helpful to put that in the comments just for clarity.
Thank you.
A couple of the other questions we will circle back to. Oh, okay. So the question was for column F. So if they're new in the job, you could put we would capture anything less than 1 is 0. So I mean, if you wanted to put get specific that it's been a half year for 6 months or something like that, you can just put 0 though if it's less than.
And quickly, the last few columns, Joe, you touched on. Column O is comments. So just anything that you thought would be meaningful for us to know or capture as you're working through the data collection file here, you could put those there. Essentially, if you thought a job was maybe on the border of a general accountant 1 and 2, and you went with a 2 because of why, some of those comments could be meaningful to capture on your end and our end. And then new this year, P and Q are just open columns, nothing to complete there, just if you need to do some calculations on your end, we leave those open for you to do those.
Yeah.
Job summaries, again, there's 90 jobs that we're looking for you to benchmark. There is not to say that you at your system have a benchmark to all 90 jobs, but this is just the bank we're trying to capture compensation data for. So some might have all 90 jobs as a benchmark. Some might only have a few, but make sure when you do match those, they are hitting that 70% threshold of that job description you see in there in column C. The final tab in our data collection file is new this year as well. It's our feedback tab. This is optional. It's just a place for you to put in your thoughts and give us some feedback on the process, what you liked, didn't like, how was the experience, was anything unclear, confusing? Were there any jobs missing in the job bank that would be meaningful to see results on? And just a catch-all for any additional thoughts and comments there at the end.
And a couple other questions we'll circle back to. And one of them was, do you differentiate salaries versus wages? I feel like I should know the difference between them. That might be something that has a specific meaning within your fund, but I think we're trying to capture annual pay versus hourly pay, just so we're able to look at things on an apples to apples basis. If that doesn't address what you're thinking, feel free to, come off mute and ask that live, because I think we're probably at the Q&A section at this point. And then similar for Catherine Morris, you asked back on the, I think, about the system assets. So does the system, the question was, for the question, does the system manage investment assets? What if the answer is both? That would be a yes. Yeah. So I mean, if you do some but not others, that is going to indicate that you do have some investments that you manage. You would just put yes for that. All right. Couple reminders, and then we'll open it up for more Q&A. So the deadline for survey participation is May 13th. Again, the invite for that went out today. This is a partnership, so NCPERS sent out, you'll see the invite from NCPERS, and then the instructions in there indicate to submit the data collection file back to CBIZ. So we will receive that at the compsurveys@cbiz.com. There is an FAQ document on the landing page, so that's some of the information that's contained within the invite. And then just a reminder, the results of the survey, they are free in return for participation. So anyone on the call planning to participate, you'll receive a free copy of the survey reports. And then there is an additional dashboard available for members of NCPERS that allows for some additional slicing and dicing of the data, so you can drill in by position, but also look at segmented results by state or asset size or something like that. So if you're looking for a more tailored peer group than the full group of participants, that is something that is available through the member dashboard. And then as we collect the data, we're going to have to go through a process to consolidate, scrub, do some follow-up questions, but we're targeting generally fall 2025 to get that participant report back to all the participants. So I think with that, we can open it up for any additional questions. So I see, hey, Neil, I see you had a question. Are there any new job summaries for this year's survey? That's a great question. I was looking at that just a moment ago. So I think we did build out the actuarial family a little bit. I think historically we had only asked for the chief actuary. So we've identified some job leveling there where we can get greater insight based on the appropriate, job level, years of experience, things like that. So hopefully that's going to provide some helpful data to some of the participants. Taylor, was there anything else that we added?
I believe just that family was all we added this year.
Yeah. So pretty minor changes. All of the other positions are the same. So it should be pretty similar to last year, other than the actuaries. And then Tyler asked, for a number of members, do you want inactive members? For inactive, would that, so I mean, if that's retirees, yes, I mean, that's what we're looking for. Maybe there's a designation there with inactive that I don't understand, but I think what we're trying to capture there, like the intent is to understand the scope of activity, right? So like how many people exist out there that might have questions about, benefits, that, how much mailing activity is going on, right? We're trying to understand that scoping. And so if it's a member status that is driving a certain level of activity, then yes, we're going to want to know that. But if they're some designation where they're no longer eligible for benefits and don't require communication and follow-up, then no, we would not need to capture that information. So there's a question, can you add communication director to the list of jobs? Let's see.
Yeah, we do have a survey job code COM 101 is communications manager / director.
Yeah, so we have the / and that's one of those things where we just haven't received a lot of job matches there overall. And so like, as we see more of that, then we could say, similar to what we did with the actuaries, that there's a lot of organizations that are matching to that job. We need to have some more of that career family built out, that we could break that out. So I mean, certainly those are the things that we evaluate going forward. Got a question on DCF1 to go back to the org info and explain the option of system versus state municipality plan sponsor again. You know, so really we're trying to understand, I think maybe the easiest thing to focus on is like the wages. So there are plans, there are systems for state employees, and the pay ranges for those staff are set by the state classification system. And so the staff within the system, they don't have the discretion to adjust their own pay structures, set their salary increase budgets, create their own classifications. All of that governance and administration is done by the state plan sponsor. So you could have a similar setup with cities or counties or, you know, other things as well. And so we're trying to just understand, do you have the discretion within the system to set the budget, to determine the number of employees that you have, to set your own benefits, you know, have your own HR team to set and manage wages. And we ask that separate for the investment staff, because what we've seen in some cases for like state plans, most of the operations staff employees are going to be part of the state classification system, but there is a carve out where the investment staff can be managed within the system, right? So we could have some differences there. Hopefully that difference helps. Inactive, so going back to the inactive related to the members, inactive equals members who have an account balance but are no longer contributing to the plan. I would say include them. I mean, if they're eligible, if they're going to have questions at some point or need to receive communications, they're going to be part of that activity. I would say include active.
Yeah, I concur with that, Joe.
Yeah. And then Anthony Ross asks, salaried folk generally do not get paid for overtime. Wage earners generally get paid for overtime. So yeah, so that kind of like exempt, non-exempt distinction. We are asking for both, but like nonetheless, like we're not trying to capture overtime wages. It's really at that. So what you should do for hourly employees is look at the hourly rate times the number of annual hours, right? So if it's a 40-hour work week, that's going to be 2080. Some of you might have like a 35-hour work week or 37 and a half, kind of take that into consideration, but kind of report what that employee would receive kind of full-time pay without, but we're not trying to capture overtime as a part of that. Another question, we don't have a separate investment management organization, but we also do not manage our funds internally. How should we respond to that information? We used to provide the percentage of investment types in the past. Sorry if I'm not understanding this section. So I think we're back down here. So if the dollars come into your fund, then you're going to say yes on this first part, right? Like you manage that within the system. Now, when it gets to these other questions, right, you say, but we also do not manage our funds internally. So I'm not sure, you might want to reach out with some of the specifics to, like, you know, you can email us and
Well,
we can.
actually, Joe, I think I can lend some
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, so if you have money managers that are managing your assets versus in-house staff that are actually managing, then all those questions from 32 through 35, you would answer no. Right? So because you're not managing it internally, you have, you know, just Invesco or Lazard or some of these other managers managing your assets, then
Yeah.
it would be, the answer would be no. So just to put an underscore on this, line 30, does your system manage investment assets. All we're asking here is there are just maybe about 10 to 15 states where there is a separate investment entity. For instance, Joe put out Minnesota, Wisconsin is another, Washington State is another, Montana, South Carolina, Massachusetts, etc. They have their own separate entity that actually invests pension assets as well as probably some other assets. For the vast majority of pension plans, you do manage the uh, your the dollars for your participants. Um, Whether that you manage that internally with your own staff or externally with money managers, that's the questions for 32 through 35. Hopefully that made it clearer.
And if it's all farmed out to external managers, right, then we would look for that 0% managed internally. But it helps us understand those dollars still are coming in. Someone on the team is having to make decisions about who you hire to manage to manage the money externally, right? There's still due diligence and review and fee negotiations and things like that are going to take place that's helpful to understand. All right, got another question. Can you please explain the base salary percentiles that were listed in the 2024 report? 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile. I'll stop sharing my screen just to for that question. So when we report salary percentiles, as we evaluate the salary survey data, we need to figure out what to report back, and we're looking for what are broadly called measures of central tendency to report. And so sometimes you might see average. We like to look at percentiles as a more intuitive way to understand comp, because sometimes the average can be skewed to outliers, and it only presents one number. It doesn't help you understand like the distribution of pay that you might see in the market range. And so to explain market percentiles, if you were to line up pay low to high for any given job for all of the participants that are providing data, that 25th percentile, that is, the point in the lineup where 25% of the peers pay below that salary value and 75% pay above. At the 50th percentile, that's where half pay more, half pay less. That's also called the median. And then at the 75th percentile, you still have 25% of the peers that pay above that salary value and 75% pay less. So the 50th, it gives you that middle point. We like that better than the average because, again, it's if you have someone like one data, if we were to look at, the average salary of all of the participants in this call, and then look at the average salaries with wealth with Warren Buffett on the call, like that average is going to shoot up dramatically, but like the median wouldn't move really at all, right? So we're trying to eliminate big outliers. And then it gives more insight because you can understand like how is pay concentrated through that range instead of just providing the average. Hopefully that helps. What other questions? And
Joe, I think you missed a question from Quinn.
Quinn, okay. All right, wanted to follow up on the previous topic. I am employed with a state agency who is exempt from the state's classification plan that is tied to set in stone pay ranges. Moving forward, it is intended that I select system in the organization, governance, and administration section. Previously, we were selecting agency, system administrating the pension plan. So you're employed by a state agency who is exempt from the state's class. Yes. So you would say that you set that within the system, right? Like you have the discretion within your system to have your own ranges, set your own classifications. That is correct. You should select system.
Right. There were two additional questions that were submitted before the webinar. Let me just quickly read them for you. How many pensions have a bonus attached to performance, and which one? So I'm guessing if there's a performance attached to it, what type of performance? So I guess, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that is data that we report out at a high level in the participant report. So that's information that will be kind of reported when we gather all of this information. I want to say, I don't have it in front of me from last year's report, that like that number is probably close to 20% provide a bonus. Now how much of that, so when you say performance, like bonus tied to performance, some might refer to that as merit pay. We don't refer to that as merit pay, but we also report in those salary increase practices how many funds have merit pay. So, you know, one, it is separate from that, right? Like a one-time payment. We don't really get into detail of how much of it is based on performance. Like generally, it's going to be based on performance at some level. So either based on the organization, you know, or to some individual metric, but we see it's about 20%. Now, as we start to look at as organizations get larger, typically measured by assets under management, we're going to see that start to change and flip. And so like when you get on the higher end, that probably flips where it's about 80% have some type of incentive, 20% do not. But we'll have some insights on that in the survey report.
And then the last question submitted before the webinar, will there be questions that appear once you've answered a particular question based on that initial answer?
No, so as we mapped through that, we don't have any that are going to appear. You know, in some cases we could probably have some that suppress, right? So as you answer no, there's some things that don't apply. But no, nothing new is going to pop up upon a yes.
Right. Well, I don't see any more questions. But this has been really good. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Taylor. I think, you know, we've answered some questions that may have tripped some folks up and, you know, clarified some others that were unclear. So that's great. Let me just end by announcing a couple of things for the upcoming program. Our next webinar is on the 2025 proxy season, key votes for pensions to watch. That will be on April 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then our major conference, our annual conference and exhibition, ACE, will be held in Denver, Colorado, Taylor's hometown, May 18th through the 21st. Hopefully folks on this call will be joining us there. So yeah, thank you everyone. And hopefully you found this informative and we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Nick.
Guys.